Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. I am your host, Josh Amick, with my same panel as Tuesday's episode. We got Fritz, John, and Mark. We're going to get right into it to the matchup of the week with the Aggies riding a 9-game winning streak, Bobcats still undefeated at a 10-game winning streak. Who starts a losing streak this weekend, Fritz?
I'm afraid the Davis Aggies are going to be the underdog at home. The Bobcats have just been so good. They're healthy. I imagine they'll get Bryce Grebe back at linebacker this week. They set him out last week because they obviously didn't need him. 511 rushing yards against Sac State. That number will drop against UC Davis because of their defense. Their defense is led by a great safety named Rex Connors, and then his little brother Porter is just loaded linebacker. UC Davis is good. Now, as Mark mentioned on Tuesday, that's a big win that they pulled off at Washington Grizzly Stadium. That said, the Cats are for real. I just don't see it happening for Davis this weekend.
John, what do you think?
Oh yeah, I think it's going to take quite the effort for Davis to pull this one off. The home field advantage I think gives them a chance, but the performance against Montana, as Fritz noted and as Mark noted last time, they played really well, especially in that second half to close it out. So that gives them a lot of momentum. Montana State, I think on that side, they've played really well this year, but you could also take into account who have they played. They really haven't been challenged that much since they played New Mexico back in week 0 on the scoreboard. Eastern Washington played them tight into later on in the third quarter, and then Tommy Mellott busted that one open. They tacked on another score to win by 14. So it's going to be about how would Montana State react if Davis does jump out on them, and if Davis can actually get that jump initially.
Yeah, we'll see. Fritz has talked about the Grizz hangover. Teams the weeks after they play the Grizz and beat the Grizz and happen to Weber, and we'll see if it happens to UC Davis. We'll see. I think it'll be a closer game than maybe people think. I don't know how much of a home field advantage Davis has compared to Idaho or Montana State. We'll see. I mean, like I said Tuesday, if Montana State does what Montana State does, it might not matter about Davis. ESPN is probably wishing maybe this was the game they had instead of last week's game. That would be a cute story for UC Davis to win. I mean, nobody. I don't think, not even in Davis, would probably pick them to win the conference, and this would pretty much wrap it up for them. Montana State's kind of weird. Like you guys talked about, they haven't been tested much. I mean, Eastern was a test. New Mexico was, 10 years ago, it seems like, but since then it's been nothing. I mean, they had to kind of play in the fourth quarter to finish off the Eastern game, but other than that, not really. I would, like I said last week, I would be more impressed with UC Davis if they won this week than I would if Montana State won.
Fair enough. We'll see. We'll see what all happens this Saturday for that primetime game. Another game that may not be indicative of a great matchup because of their records, but could be a good matchup is the Idaho State Bengals, who keep improving. They're now going on the road against Eastern. Who has a better performance this weekend, just in the quarterback aspect? We think Kobe Tracy, or we think Kikoa Vispris? What do you think, John?
Oh, well, I mean, both quarterbacks are great. I feel like Vesperis has a great target in Efton Chisholm, and he's taken advantage of that. I know they had 10 connections last week, or at least Chisholm had 10 receptions. And Kobe Tracy seems to be a good deep ball thrower. I've seen that a few times, especially against Sac State. So I think it's going to be a very interesting matchup between these two. Eastern's definitely controlled the rivalry in recent years, in fact, since they've really started. Idaho State did get the last win. They outscored them 21-0 in the fourth quarter back in 2023. But playing on the red turf, Idaho State's only win at Eastern Washington was before that was laid down back in 2002. That was a 21-14 decision. So it's another one of those Bengals last week, first win in Weber since 1984. They're looking to knock off another losing streak on the road this week.
Yeah, I think Tracy will statistically we'll have the better game just because they'll throw more. I think Vesperis, we mentioned him and Chisholm and stuff like that, but I think Eastern will probably run a fair amount with ISU allowing 235 yards on the ground, whether it's Vesperis running or Taylor running or running backs and stuff. I just think that their offense will be a little more balanced. It'll be a shootout either way with a lot of yards, but I think statistically Tracy will end up with a quote unquote better day throwing the ball than Vesperis.
Yeah, I agree with Mark. I think Kobe Tracy is just, well, I think I mentioned it before. I just like the way he throws the ball. he was hitting some really tight windows, just throwing some great passes, and we'll see more of that on Saturday. But like Mark mentioned, Eastern has the balanced offense. It's going to be awfully hard for Idaho State to pull off 2 landmark wins in a row, going and winning on the red turf. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm going to like Kobe Tracy's numbers at the end of the game. I'm sure of it.
All right, moving on to the topic that seems to be dominating this week is Portland State heading to Missoula to take on the Grizz. Portland State's been playing well lately, especially their quarterback, Showdowns. So is this now a game that you're worried about for the Grizz, or you think this is a perfect opportunity for them to bounce back, John?
I mean, I have a little bit of creeping concern just after the 2 quarterback system and everything overall, though I still feel confident that Montana's going to get it done, and they're still the 10th ranked team in the nation. Portland State, as Fritz said on Tuesday, they might be the best 2-win team in the FCS, but they still got to come into a very difficult place to play, and they've got to play an opponent that does have 7 wins on the season. So Montana will want to get back on track, especially going to Bozeman the following week. So I think as long as Montana can start to get their running game back on track and they don't fall behind early, I feel like the crowd in Missoula would not respond well at all with an early deficit again this season. But I feel like Montana should be able to take care of business.
What? You imagine the talk in Missoula if they lost a 3rd conference game at home, that'd be a problem. I mean, they were the title game, so we'll see. You would think Montana would bounce back, especially being at home. We'll see if they're looking ahead a little bit toward Montana State. Maybe, Sasha Ray could gouge them a little bit. It kind of depends. Portland State tends to play a little better at home and stuff like that. But still, Portland State's a dangerous team. And if Montana, some bad things happen to Montana and maybe their defense can't stop Portland State as much, it could get a little bit of a nail biter in Missoula.
Yeah, I expect Montana to bounce back a little bit. Yeah, Portland State's dangerous. Saucere is another one of those quarterbacks. It seems like there's a bunch of these guys that are just super athletic and fast and can throw it, and he's one of them. Main concern is just seeing Montana's offense get on track. The last, they scored on their first drive of the second half. I tumbled in the end zone, and then after that it went punt, interception, punt, and then 2 turnovers on down. So 19 plays, 65 yards, just kind of a sad total. I expect the run game to get on track with Eli Gilman and Nick Osmo, and the Grizz to bounce back.
All right, and the last topic that we have for this episode before we get into our picks is Weber State on the road against Idaho. Weber State's offense looked pretty good last week, and with Idaho having those concerns at quarterback, do you think that the Wildcats have a shot to end their losing streak this week, or do we think that it doesn't matter who the Vandals have behind center, they're going to get it done at home? What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I don't think it matters. Wagner's he could be a number 1 on a lot of teams too. So I don't think that's the issue. And their defense is, even if they have a couple of guys nicked up on defense, that's still better than Idaho State's defense. So I don't think that'll be a problem. They got a really good pass rush, and they put pressure on Munoz and stuff like that. So I don't, and Idaho's playing at home. They haven't played at home much this year, so they should be pretty excited and pretty fired up with that crowd. So I don't think Idaho should have a whole lot of problems if they take care of business.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I mentioned before, I thought Idaho's defense played fairly well for most of that game last week. Keyshawn James Newby was a handful once again. Their DNs are really good. He's one of them. Idaho's playing at home, and I think playing for a home playoff game. And Weber State just doesn't have it this year, so it's going to be all Vandals.
Yeah, I mean, Idaho's still in that running for the bye at this point. You know, they were what, number 7 in that initial ranking, so right there on that bye cusp. So, yeah, I mean, Weber State's got a chance. I mean, if you can go in there and play well, yeah, you'll give yourself a chance regardless, especially if Munoz throws the ball as well as he did last week. But I think, like Mark mentioned, even with some injuries, Idaho's defense is better than what Idaho State's putting out there on the defensive side of the ball. So it's going to take a little bit more effort from Munoz and that Weber State offense to get the points up. As for the Idaho coaching situation, they've been playing the injury carousel all season, so it's nothing new to them. Whoever starts seems to be ready to go next man up.
It's a good point. I like that. That leads us into my favorite segment of these episodes, and that is the picks. We had 3 people go undefeated last week. Fritz lost one, but he picked his home team, Montana, so no surprise there. But Mark, Ian, and John all went 6-0, sweeping the board last week. So they made up some ground, but Fritz still at top just with that one loss last week, 68-15 on the record. So, like always, Fritz, lead us off with your picks.
Okay, well, I'll go with the Bobcats over the Davis Aggies. I'll go with the Grizz over the Vikings. Northern Arizona's a pick over the Bears of Greeley, Colorado. Idaho over Weber. I will take Eastern over Idaho State. And then we have a battle of teams that are 1-5 in conference in the Causeway Classic, Cal Poly and Sac State. And I think Sac State should win, but I'm going to pick Cal Poly. That's my upset.
All right, I like it. Ian is not here. He is second in the standings with a 67-16 record, just one game behind Fritz, but he did give me his picks. So Ian's picks are Northern Arizona over Northern Colorado, Montana over Portland State, Eastern over Idaho State, Sac State over Cal Poly, unlike Fritz. So he has a chance to make up. We'll see how that game goes. He's got UC Davis winning at home against Montana State. That's probably an upset there. And then he has Idaho beating Weber State. So that leads us into Mark, who is just 2 games back with a 66-17 record. So, Mark, what are your picks for this weekend?
All right, I'm going to take Northern Arizona to win at Northern Colorado. Eastern to eke out a 87-84 victory over Idaho State. Take the Grizz to bounce back and beat Portland State. I don't know about this Sac State Cal Poly as much as like to go with Fritz and pick Cal Poly. I'm going to give Sac State one more chance and I'll pick Sac State. Also, as much as I want to pick UC Davis, I think Montana State's going to win that game. And then I got Idaho beating Weber State.
All right, and that brings us then to John, who swept the board last week, going 6-0. He is now 63-20 on the season. John, what you got this weekend?
All right, well, I got Montana over Portland State at home, Northern Arizona over Northern Colorado. I've also got Eastern over Idaho State, and I feel like I'm going to be trying to find the over for both halves and the entire game in that one. I'm going to take Cal Poly over Sac State. I just feel like Sac State's kind of given up on the season. You know, they've had their opportunities to keep trying to fight forward, and they haven't shown it. I've got Idaho over Weber State, and then I've got Montana State on the road, and I think that one will be the game of the season.
All right, that leads to me, who's at the bottom of the barrel, just had 2 weeks of hope, and then it's all downhill from there. So I got Northern Arizona over Northern Colorado. I got Montana over Portland State. This game, Idaho State and Eastern, I was flipped. But growing up in Everett, Washington, I'm going to go with Eastern in this game. I got Sac State over Cal Poly. That game seemed like we were flipped. I got Idaho over Weber State. And just to try to make up some ground, I'm going to go with UC Davis over Montana State. I have no hope in catching anybody. So just so I can maybe sweep the board this week, I'm going to pick the Aggies. Upset, or maybe not upset in your opinion, the Bobcats. But other than that, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. I want to thank my panel, as always, John, Fritz, and Mark. We'll see you next week and break down that great matchup, as John calls matchup of the season, on Tuesday next week. We'll see you then. Thanks for joining the Big Sky Now podcast. Until then, take care.